Hey everyone, welcome to the first intermediate video from the CGBlendTutorials video series. In the first 7 videos I made, I went over the most basic things you need to know in order to learn how to navigate yourself within Blender. In these next series of videos, they don't have to necessarily be watched in any particular order. I'm just going to be going over some concepts and some techniques that mesh well together and that will allow you to learn how to use the software more effectively. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about how to add loop cuts to a mesh and how to use proportional editing. So if I go to this mesh and I enter edit mode within it, then you will see that I have a standard cube. If I wanted to, for example, extend this cube up and make 4 more segments of equal size, without proportional editing or loop cuts, I would have to go to face selection and extrude up 2, extrude 2, extrude 2. That's all fine and well, but an easier way for me to do that would be to add loop cuts. And a loop cut is basically these edges that surround this mass. So I'm going to undo all of that. I grab this guy and pull him up and hit Control R. Control R is the hotkey to make a loop cut. You'll see this pink outline appear. If I scroll up on my mouse wheel, it will add more loop cuts. And so I'm up to 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the same amount I had on my other model. I'm going to left click. Now you'll notice that once you left click, you're not out of the command yet. You still have the option to grab and move your loop cuts up and down the mesh. However, I'm just going to hit escape, and that's going to default them to the center. So now I have the exact same outcome, just with a few less steps. So as opposed to extruding up the face one portion at a time, I can take any object and add as many loop cuts as I want. I can even loop cut vertically. So if I want to select a vertical loop cut, I'll click and escape, and now this guy has been subdivided in half. If I want to select a loop cut without having to shift click all of the edges that make it up, I can just hit Alt, hold down Alt, and right click, and that will allow me to select the entire loop cut. If I hold Shift and Alt after selecting something and still right click, then that will add more loop cuts to my selection. Proportional editing ties very well into loop cuts because say I want to have this mass taper up to a point. If I select these faces, I'm gonna delete these loop cuts. To delete loop cuts, select them, hit delete, and then go down to dissolve edges. And that just eliminates the loop cut without removing any of your geometry. I go to my face and scale it in and try to taper this down. Well, I have to go to each loop cut, select it, and scale it, and the results are a little choppy. You don't have a very consistent taper up to that point. So if I undo that, what I'm going to want to do instead is use proportional editing. So if I hit O on my keyboard, you'll notice that this icon turns blue. So on, off. I want to make sure it's on. And now whenever I scale this face, you'll see there is a circle around the face. Using the mouse wheel, I can increase or decrease the radius of that circle, and that is the radius of influence. So I want to increase the radius until I have selected all of the loop cuts that I want to edit, and now when I scale them up and down, they all follow suit. So if I pull that down to a point, that is a much smoother and more consistent scaling down to that point. If I undo that, next to the loop cut icon, you have your fall off selection. So here you're able to really choose how those loop cuts follow what you are scaling. So in this case, let's say I use inverse square. When I scale this, you'll notice that it is slightly different from the other one that we were using, which was the smooth fall off. If I'll undo, I'll show you a reference. Put that there. So this is the inverse square. Okay. So you'll notice that whenever I scale with more than one object in the scene, well, the object to my left that isn't selected is still being taken in by the area of influence. So I can change it from enabled to connected, and that means that anything not connected to the object I'm editing will not be affected. So here, even with the same radius of influence, my mesh is only affecting what is connected to. So that is with the inverse square fall off editor. Let's say I change it to linear. If I go here and scale this, the effect is very subtle, but you can start to see that there are differences in how that proportional editor falls off. Do one more. Let's do, we'll try sphere out. Let's see what it does. That one kind of makes it a little bit more concave as it goes up. So that's something you can play with. That is very helpful when we get into some other modeling techniques, or when we get into smoother surfaces or subsurface modeling. But that is a basic introduction to proportional editing and loop cuts. So I hope you guys learned something, and I'll see you in the next video.